here's another episode of Point of View. You're welcome. I know you asked for it, and here we are, just like every other day. Actually, there's probably just as many people not asking for it, or at least asking that we don't do it. We get a lot of hate mail. And this, of course, episode will be no different. There's just issues that need to be responded to. There is TikTok. There's such a thing as TikTok. And as long as there's such a thing as TikTok, there will be such a thing as Point of View needed that responds to TikTok with thought. We say we add thought to TikTok. And here's the thought that we add. When Point of View responds to a video, what we want to do is bring in a Christian worldview. Because there are something like 60% of America claims to be Christian. But yet they will support channels that have videos like this guy, Sage.Nova, or girl, who I really can't tell, Sky or girl. But we responded to one video from her back on Tuesday, I think, of this week. And now we've got to respond to another one because in the process of doing our due diligence and investigating his or her channel, the TikTok channel, we found another one that just has to be responded to. And it's actually he or she. I'm going to call him a he. I just think it's a he. I don't know. I think he calls himself non-binary. So I'm not positive about that. Anyway, in the process of investigating the TikTok channel, Sage.Nova had some... What Sage.Nova does is he presents an argument, and he really, in classic TikTok fashion, presents counter arguments to his argument, but he presents straw men and then tears down the straw man, which means this fake argument that's easy to tear apart, and makes it look like his argument is like solid and accurate and you got to agree with him. But we're the other side, right? We're the ones who disagree with him. And I think we can give better answers, better arguments than what he presented. So without further ado, by the way, this is the show where we are unashamed to look at biblical or political, whatever Christianity issues, whatever we're looking at. We're looking at it from a biblical worldview. We do that because Jesus died on the cross, rose from the dead. That's historically provable, by the way. And since Jesus rose from the dead, we can then have confidence that Jesus really was God like he said he was, and the Bible really is true like he said it is. And if the Bible is true, then we're wrong about issues if we disagree with it. So we need to make sure we agree with the Bible in every area. So without further ado, let's see how agreeable this video is to the Bible.
I'm a conservative. I believe in limited government. Oh, so I can easily vote? We told the government to make that more difficult, actually. 'Cause fraud. Right. Can I peacefully protest? Not if you block the street. And if you get hit, that's your fault. The person that hits you is protected by the government. Okay, well, I'm trans. Can I pee where I want? We unsuccessfully tried to make that not legal, actually. Could I play in school sports? No. Do I have any autonomy? Do you have a uterus? Yeah. No. What would happen if I just... Anyway, we have literal bounty hunters that can get $10,000 from the government if they turn you in. Bounty hunters? Okay, well, if the government is stepping in, I think we should really do something about guns. That's my rights you're walking on. Roe v. Wade. It's murder. But hitting a protester isn't?
All right, first of all, if you're not upset and really disturbed by this rant, then you are the problem in America. This really ought to just red flags everywhere. Oh my goodness, this guy or girl just argued for stabbing a child in the womb, like literally with a stabbing motion, and as if like this is a just thing to do. So this ought to be disturbing. But you notice that the point that he or she is making is that conservatives argue for limited government until it's an issue where they want big government. And he's not even saying Republicans, because I would actually agree with him that there are areas where Republicans will argue for a limited government and then turn around and argue for big government. But he's actually dealing with conservative issues and saying that conservatives do this. And okay, we're going to break it down and analyze whether or not this is true. Justin, your first impression is, do you agree with him? Him or her?
My first impressions is I didn't see an Adam's apple, so I'm pretty sure that's a girl. Could be wrong, but I'm still firmly in the that's a girl camp.
He says, okay, I'm reading from his TikTok. He says, IDK what I was born as either. So I don't know what I was born as either. So he doesn't even know, he or she doesn't even know what he was born as. So I don't even know how you could not know like what your biological was at birth. I mean, that seems pretty easy to figure out. But
I mean, unless it's the very limited cases of intersex, but
I doubt that. I doubt that. But okay, so you call her a girl, I'll call him a guy, and then we'll cover our bases so that we're at least halfway
yeah, we'll just
right.
hit all of them.
Okay, so let's break this down. Let's take it piece by piece, and let's see. We'll deal with one argument at a time.
I'm a conservative. I believe in limited government. Oh, so I can easily
All right,
vote?
pause.
We told the government.
So here's the thing. I think the dying on the hill of small government is kind of dumb. Here's why. I want the government small in some areas, and I want it big in other areas. I want it big in the areas that it's supposed to be. I don't want the police to go around with, a beanbag sack to throw at somebody if they're trying to murder someone. I want a police force that's well armed. I want them to be able to do their job. I want the government big in that sense. I want them big in being able to fund a military. I want them big to do what is justly in their purview to do. But everywhere else, I want them small because they have no business being there. In fact, I want them non-existent if they have no business being there. So am I across the board? Like, do I want government that can't enforce laws because it's so small, can't enforce laws against murder? No, of course not. I want big government against murder. I do. But I don't want government sticking its hands where it doesn't have business, which means even in the enforcing of the law against murder, you don't get to override rights to privacy and things like that. So be as big as you can be where you have the right to be, and then get out of everything else. Be small everywhere else, big where you need to be. That's my approach on big versus small government.
Right. And so conservatives are saying limited government. Limited means as small as possible. It doesn't mean no government, right? That would be I guess, libertarian or even anarchist. So conservatives do acknowledge that there is government needed and there are restrictions that need to be in place against certain practices. Conservatives argue that there has to be some limitations on who votes. We can't just let everybody vote. There has to be some limitations on a process for coming into the country, rather than just having open borders and anyone just comes into the country without us knowing. Not that there is a no limits, that the government is unlimited or that the government is completely limited. Just that there is some place for government and there's a place that government doesn't belong. So on its face already, it's already falling short because he's trying to make the case that conservatives argue for no government and they don't.
Right. And also, real quick, this idea that, because I know a lot of people would say, oh, you believe in limited government, so how about that fund for the military? Well, again, that's a legitimate place where the government, I want a government that has a really big military, not in order to use it against its own citizens or against for unjust purposes, but I want it to be able to accomplish what it has been assigned to do. That's my whole theory on government, is it ought to be big enough to accomplish what it has been tasked to do, not by even the founding fathers, but by God. God gave the government a legitimate place, a legitimate role, and I think it ought to be big enough and strong enough and powerful enough to do what it is assigned to do and nothing else.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let me go back. While you were doing that, I was trying to rearrange this here so I could show a clip here of both of us with this as it's playing. Let's see if this works. All right, here we go. I think this might work.
I'm a conservative. I believe in limited government. Oh, so I can easily vote? We told the government to make that more difficult, actually, because fraud. Right. Can I?
Okay, so first point is I can if you're conservative and you want limited government, then you want the government out of the voting process. You want it to be easy for people to vote. Is that true?
Um, I don't. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I see the connection, because first of all, mostly when people talk about limited government, they're talking about the federal government. That's not what we're discussing when we're discussing laws that have been made to address the issue of fraud. That's been state governments that are putting forth their own bills. So by nature, we're talking about federalism here, not the federal government. So we're kind of already in the very first one off topic, which is astounding that right out of the gate you go off the course. you know,
Yeah.
it's like teeing off in golf and hitting it from hole 1 to hole 18. It's not where you're supposed to go, but no, there is a legitimate place for government. And if there is to be any certainty in the government itself that it is carrying out what it is tasked to do, then having elections that are within reason, protected against fraud, there is I don't see any issue where that's a big government thing. What Because a lot of times when we talk about big government, we're talking about you're opening a can of worms. You're going down a slippery slope where if you give the government this right, it's going to have the right to do this, this, and this. I don't see how that applies to voting IDs.
Yeah, and what we do in voting is we limit government. We have the power. If we don't have good processes for voting, how do we limit government? Right? I mean, government, it should be limited to be controlled by the people who are invested in it. So if government is controlled by people who have who aren't invested in that government, which is why I think actually voting ought to be based on taxation. But if we don't limit who is involved in the process of picking our leaders, then we'll never be able to limit the government. The government will be just run wild like it's kind of doing right now.
Yeah, and speaking of the government being limited by the people, you know what the majority of Americans support, including, by the way, I believe, well, I can't remember perfectly, so I won't make that claim. But the majority of Americans, last I saw, supported voting IDs. And by the way, if you are going to dare stand in the position of someone who believes you need to show a vaccine ID to get into a restaurant, but not show a voting ID, or to show just a standard ID to be able to vote, I think your priorities are a little messed up.
Yeah, and it okay. So if you're not a citizen of the country, or you're not eligible for voting, why, we are trying to stop you from voting. That's true. We are trying to make it harder. But if you are a citizen and you are eligible to vote, we're not making it harder at all. I mean, it's not hard. To get even registered to vote, you have to have, when you go get your license, you get registered to vote. That means everyone who has a driver's license. And that's not hard to do. Or you don't even have to have a driver's license. But I mean, this is actually a very simple thing. To fly on a plane is much, much harder than voting. Almost everything that we need to do to live is much harder than voting. So we're not making it hard to vote anyway on its face.
And one last thing, I know we got to hurry up because we can't take this long at every point, but do you see how whoever just mocked the idea of fraud? Like, it doesn't happen. It does. Now, you can debate whether it was on a wide enough scale in order to affect the election. There's an audit coming from Arizona soon that should give us a better picture of that. But whether you believe it affected the election or not, irrelevant, and we've discussed that many times. But you're just going to hand wave like fraud is nothing?
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't do anything against fraud.
Not only does it happen, but it does happen on large scales, possibly large enough to flip elections. And that should concern every American, not just the ones who lost the last election.
But it's the thing to do now, if you're on one side of the aisle, it's the thing to do to just mock the idea that fraud could be a thing. How about engage in the discussion?
Yeah.
Rather than just mock it and try to hand wave it. Because now you're not trying to win anybody.
Right. Well, TikTok isn't exactly the place for engaging in discussions. We're doing that here to slow down. We take these TikTok videos, we slow them down, and we think about them. We add thought to TikTok.
Peacefully protest? Not if you block the street. And if you get hit, that's your fault. The person that hits you is protected by the government.
All right. Is it peaceful protesting when you're blocking the street? I mean, in the sense that you're not killing anyone, maybe. It just depends, because you're kind of walking out in the middle of the street and endangering lives. But assuming that everybody stops, I suppose you could say you're not hurting individuals in a physical way, but it's not peaceful. Imagine if the Chinese came over and blocked our streets, right, from a foreign country. We would say this is an act of war. We can't continue with our daily business. Our economy is disrupted. All kinds of things are messed up by you blocking the street. The street was made and paid for by taxpayers in order to accomplish the transit of the people. You're blocking that. That is not exactly peaceful.
And let's not pretend that we don't know what this is about here. Over the last summer, the people didn't just block the streets. What this was all about, the idea that you're protected if you hit somebody who's protesting, is because protesters would get people's cars surrounded by people and start beating on the car, pointing guns at them, yank them out and beat the crap out of them. So you'll forgive me if I think it's okay for that person to get out of there at whatever cost is necessary because they are defending themselves from aggressive jerks who are trying to just go on a rampage because George Floyd or something.
Yeah. So now we have two arguments so far. The first one saying that that conservatives are being disingenuous by asking for limited government and asking for restrictions on voting. You know, more heavier voter IDs and that stuff, which is completely ridiculous. You can't have limited government if you don't have restrictions on voting. Then he's saying conservatives are disingenuous for asking for limited government and being against peaceful protests. But nobody's against a peaceful protest. What we're saying is these are not peaceful protests. Even if they don't erupt into violence, they're not peaceful, but they always end in violence.
Right. So for the context that's necessary, I am for the government protecting my right to defend myself.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's going to actually come up again at the end of the video.
Okay, well, I'm trans. Can I pee where I want? We unsuccessfully tried to make that not legal, actually. Could I play in school sports? No. Do I?
Okay, let's hold on.
That's actually just not true.
Yeah, that's actually
not true.
So, first of all, no, you can't pee where you want. Like, this should not be a surprise to anybody. Nobody in this country has the right to pee wherever they want. I'm sorry, I'm being vulgar. He used the word, but no, there are restrictions. There have always been restrictions as to where you can defecate or urinate. You can't do it in places, in public places. Why? Because it is inappropriate. Especially in public places where the opposite sex is, because that is inappropriate. And now you want to say, I should be able to pee wherever I want. Even though I have male parts, I'm not going to go to the bathroom made for the male parts. I'm going to go to the bathroom made for the women parts because I feel like a woman on the inside, even though I'm a man on the outside. None of that makes
Yeah.
any sense whatsoever, not even a little bit.
So I think the government does have a legitimate role to protect women from being sexually assaulted, from being exposed to things that they should not be exposed to. I think nakedness is very clearly laid out as a thing that is not meant for public, specifically not for people of opposite sexes to be seeing each other. So yes, I do believe the government has a role to say that men should not be exposing themselves to women, especially if it's not welcome. We could go off on like fornication, but in an unwelcomed environment, and especially not where little girls could be. Yep, that's a legitimate role of the government. So I do want the government big and being able to say, no, you may not do that.
Yeah, I mean it's that simple. It's this one's that one's weird. And then he talks about the playing in school sports, and of course conservatives are against that, but the reason is, number one, it normalizes something that is false, that this person is a woman because they say so, and number two, it is actually destroys women's sports. There's just no more women's sports anymore because all the men are playing on the women's sports, and the men are naturally better because it's about what's real. And in reality, men have a man's body, whether they feel like a woman or not, and the man's body beats the woman's body in sports on average. This is just the facts of life.
You remember what I said on I think it's yesterday's episode about poisoning the well? This was poisoning the well. Because notice she, whoever, didn't say, can I play on women's sports if I am a trans woman? Just said, can I play sports? Here's the thing. If you're a boy, you can play boy sports. You can. Now, most boys who want to play women's sports are not good enough to be on the boys' team, which you could call that a coincidence or not. I don't know. But the poisoning in the well is, I am not allowed to play sports. You're discriminating against me. No. Same rules apply to you as everyone else. If you're a girl, you can play on the girls' team. If you're a boy, you can play on the boys' team. Period. You're not being discriminated against one way or the other. Yeah. If any boy identifies as a girl, he still can play on the boys' team. If any girl identifies as a boy, she can still play on the girls' team. No one is being discriminated against. The law is applying equally to everyone.
Exactly.
Any autonomy? Do you have a uterus? Yeah. No. What would happen if I just... Anyway, we have literal bounty hunters that can get $10,000 from the government if they turn you in.
Okay, so do I have any autonomy at all? Do you have a uterus? No. Actually, that's ridiculous. Of course you have autonomy if you have a uterus. What you don't have what he's referring to here is that if you have a baby in your uterus, you can't kill the baby. You can certainly kill your uterus if you want, just not if it contains another human being, and that involves murder. So having a uterus has nothing to do with the laws against abortion. That involves having a baby in your uterus. If you have a human being in your uterus, no, you can't just stab that human being. I think that's the basic right to life. And yes, conservatives are for prohibiting murder. Yeah, I think that's limited government.
And you know what's the worst part? Is that this person isn't one of those people who thinks our argument is, I just want to control women's bodies, which is probably most people get that anyway. But this person is about to demonstrate that she knows that we think this is murder, that we call this murder. That's the argument. So to say that our argument is, if you have a uterus, you have no autonomy, is so disingenuous, because our argument. Our argument is, this is murder. You can't just murder someone. And yes, I want a government big enough to enforce laws against murder. And he's about to, whoever. Good grief, I hate this. They're about to argue. I just use their pronoun. His, her, whatever. I hate this so much. This person is about to argue that it's bounty hunters that come after you if you dare get an abortion in Texas. Yeah, the government should be able to enforce stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm with that. The government should be able to enforce laws against murder.
Yeah,
hmm
I'm all for
I'm
bounty
okay with it.
hunters to hunt down murderers. That's cool in my book.
Yep, if the government wants to use the citizens to report crime and reward them for that, okay, I'm good with that. Fine.
Hunters! Okay, well, if the government is stepping in, I think we should really do something about guns. That's my rights you're walking on. Roe v. Wade! It's murder. But hitting a protester isn't?
No, hitting a protester, if your life is threatened, is certainly not murder. Hitting someone who's walking out in the middle of the street on purpose to force you to stop, yeah, you should avoid hitting them at all costs. But if they get hit, that's not murder, right? They're jumped out in the middle of the street, right? And so no, that's different. Here's somebody is doing something wrong and gets hurt or killed for it. And in the other instance, Roe v. Wade, you have someone doing nothing wrong, an innocent baby who could not possibly be more innocent as a human being, who's being murdered and killed. Which one is worse? And guns are designed to protect the innocent from the guilty. The guilty don't turn in their guns with gun laws. The innocent do. And so again, you're talking about taking away defense of innocent in order to give defense and to give defense for those who are guilty. It's a complete flop around of justice. It's taking from the innocent and giving to the guilty.
Yeah, and let's not pretend like guns kill more people than they save. Look up the numbers. I remember when Steven Crowder did a Change My Mind on this issue. The statistics on how many guns or how many lives are saved by guns per year versus how many are taken unjustly by guns, not even close. Guns save way more lives and save way more people from being raped and things of that nature than they're used in crimes and things like that. But you don't hear about that because it's not the narrative. But yeah, so Roe v. Wade, terrible decision. It's murder. And you know that. You said it right there. It's murder. And then you try to deflect rather than actually address it. You know the argument and you deflect it instead of actually address it. It's terrible, and we're out of time, so I can't keep going. But this was torture. Thank you for showing me this video.
When Justin makes me choose the topics, I always make sure to torture him. Justin, next week, here's what we're going to do. Just to put a tease out there, Justin's going to choose a topic for me to respond to, and I'm going to choose a topic for Justin to respond to, and I'm going to make sure I get him good. So join us next week for that. Guys, don't forget to be right about issues. You're going to have to be biblical. You disagree with the Bible, you are definitely wrong. We'll see you next time right here on Point of View.